1. Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Larry Rhodes.
And I'm Joe Barnhart, and we want you to know that if you are an atheist, you're welcome to this program. And if you don't believe in God, or if you do, we hope you will listen and learn with us and help us by calling in.
And if you're not a believer in God, we want you to know you're not alone. This month is the birth anniversary of Robert Ingersoll.
Yes.
And today we will review important events of his life and time.
And so it's going to be a call-in show. So look at the number, if you would, on the screen. And work with us, and we'll try to be patient if you'll be patient with us.
We are having a little bit of phone trouble. We can hear you. Apparently you can't hear us. So if you have a question, you can call in, or a comment. We can hear your voice on TV, so you may have to just give us a question and hang up and let us answer over the television until we get this problem resolved. The Atheist Society of Knoxville meets once a week down at Barley's Tap Room for happy hour, food, drink, and conversation, starting at about 5:30 to 6. We'll be going on to about 7:30 or 8. So if you want to, come down and join us at Barley's Tap Room in the Old City. Everyone's welcome unless you want to come down and preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch. Please don't.
That's it, but you are welcome. And also, the Rationalists of East Tennessee meet on the first and third Sunday mornings, and have a round table discussion on the second Sunday is the afternoon of the book club. And they're going to talk about capitalism for one thing, and there are various versions of capitalism. And what Adam Smith talked about and what we have today is an altogether different ballgame.
But this particular book is what they don't tell you about capitalism. That's right.
And then on the 21st, among the East Tennessee Rationalists, we're going to have Phil King talking about the historical Jesus question. Was there a historical Jesus? If so, what was he like? How much is fact? How much is fiction?
And how much fact actually exists to support that?
Yeah,
exactly. That he was a real man, and lived among us.
And then I think on about the 23rd, we're going to do that another program on that on this program here.
Cool.
Go ahead.
The fourth Sunday is the Reflections meeting. This is an RET meeting, a potluck afternoon gathering at a member's home, so you'll have to go to the website to get more information on that. You can visit our websites for additional details, including times and locations. Sam, if we could throw those up. The websites are at the top of the screen, and ASK and RET have been around for quite a while now. RET's been around for about 15 years, haven't they?
At least, yeah. Well, I remember in the 80s it was here.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
Some version of it, yeah.
And ASK started in 2002 in the fall. In the news, we continue our End of the World watch. We note that there are just 73 days of tribulation left. If all goes well, the people at Family Radio, as they claim, we will only get to say that 10 more times. In other words, 10 more weeks before the end of the world. So. Yeah,
that was predicted when I was in, I think, the 8th grade or 9th grade in high school.
And for centuries before you were born, I'm sure, as well.
I didn't study for my algebra that time. I thought it would be useless, but I was surprised next day with a test.
With the test there.
And the governor of Texas, you want to mention that?
Governor Rick Perry's prayer rally last Saturday seems to have come up short. The forecast still favors hot, dry air, which has Texas burning up. Could all that praying have contributed to the hot air? Probably made it worse.
Well, now, he did get rain in Tennessee.
Yes.
But he wasn't specific. Now, on the program, we're going to talk about the impact of Robert Ingersoll, one of the important agnostics, who was also a major figure in the Republican Party in the 19th century.
And
a major
served
figure
in the Civil War as a major, I believe.
Yeah, and
or colonel. Sorry.
Yeah, he was in the Civil War. In fact, there's some very interesting stories about the two sides respecting him.
So we'll be talking about Robert Ingersoll, and particularly the first 5 books of the Christian Bible. He wrote His answer to those were some mistakes of Moses, and we'll be talking about that during the show today. This is a call-in show. You can call the number on the screen, 215-2288. Remind the callers again that we can hear you, but you may not be able to hear us, so you'll have to pay attention to the TV, or just give us a question that we can then answer after you hang up.
Okay.
Getting on with the show. Joe, what can you tell us about the Pentateuch? What is the Pentateuch?
The Pentateuch are the first 5 books in our Bible as we have it now. That doesn't mean they were the first ones written.
Right.
But it's the first 5 starting in the beginning.
Can you tell us when the Bible, as we see it today, was first put together?
Oh, that's a big problem.
No.
In fact, it
Never
was.
should go there.
Well, it's like saying, when did the Tennessee River start? There's so many things.
These particular books put in these particular order and called the Bible or called whatever.
Well, among the Hebrews, that couldn't have started until after the temple was destroyed, and could not have come about until after the southern kingdom was captured. And so
what years are we talking
well,
about?
the first kingdom was in the 722, the northern kingdom 722, southern kingdom about 586. So when
BC.
Yeah, BC. Okay. So when the Hebrews were in captivity, many scholars think this is when they started putting together some of their traditions and legends and myths and trying to formulate part of what we call the Old Testament.
Well, that's the Old Testament, though. That's not really speaking to what the Bible as we know it today, the book that we see. But I understand what you're talking about. We are going to be addressing the Pentateuch, which is first 5 books.
Now Moses,
we're having some more.
Numbers talks about the most humble man of that time was Moses. And here he is, if Moses wrote it, here's Moses saying,
I did all this, and I did all that.
I'm the most humble man in all Israel.
Yeah. And he describes his own death and funeral, which is kind of hard to do if you're...
And there are phrases like, in those days, in that time, and it pretty much indicates that the writers are writing about a past time,
events.
Many times.
Yes. One of the first things that Ingersoll tries to do before he actually gets into describing and rebutting the Pentateuch is to tell the preachers of the time, the Orthodox clergy, that he is great friends of theirs. And though he's an agnostic and preaches against the existence of a God, and specifically Christian dogma, he talks about how he's a great friend of the clergy, which is kind of hard to understand if you think about it in that light.
Well, he's the son of a clergyman, and he knew a lot of the clergy. And the clergy differ as persons. Some of them are to the right of Attila the Hun,
right,
and some are other places. So he had he had very personal friends among them.
Well, he basically is trying to say that I'm a friend of yours, the clergy, because I want to free you. I want to free you to think for yourself. And I'd like to read a couple of the paragraphs in the beginning of the Mistakes of Moses that address this particular thing. He says that priests and nobles will not allow the people to change because of the words in the Bible. They must follow the words in the Bible, which are unchanging. Then after a time, the priests, having become intellectually advanced, wish to take a step in the direction of progress. The people will not allow them to change. At first, the rabble are enslaved by the priest, and afterwards the rabble become the masters. One of the first things I wish to do, he says, is to free the Orthodox clergy. I'm a great friend of theirs, and in spite of what they might say against me, I am going to do them a great and lasting service. Upon their necks are the visible marks of a collar, and upon their backs those of a lash. They are not allowed to read and think for themselves. They are taught like parrots, and the best are those who repeat with the fewest mistakes the sentences that have been taught. This is my favorite quote. They sit like owls upon some dead limb of a tree of knowledge and hoot the same old hoots that had been hooted for 1,800 years. Their congregations are not grand enough nor sufficiently civilized to be willing that a poor preacher shall think for themselves. So he's actually trying to do them a favor and allow them the freedom of thought and freedom from their bondage of dogma, as it were.
In fact, I went to a theology school after college for 3 years, and it was interesting to watch the professors try to liberate the students from some of the dogmatism that they had inherited from their preachers. In fact, there was some animosity between the preachers and the professors on that.
Right. It's so true that the word that the clergy have after their years of theological study is much more in an enlightened state than the dogma that is passed down through the ranks to the final preachers who preach to the
in fact, that's been a big problem among some ministers. They know much better than what they are prepared to deliver.
And a lot of times they won't go there.
No, they won't. Now, sometimes, especially I think with some of these mega church preachers, they really don't know much about religion or biblical studies since about, say, 1700. There's so much research going on, but you listen to many of these mega church preachers, and it's as if they haven't heard about the biblical research.
Right. What they grew up hearing tales from the Bible and hearing certain aspects of belief that they then parrot because it sells. It brings in the crowd. It fills the queues. The concept of hell is a heck of a thing to throw to your crowd. It keeps the people in the queue, but they don't want to get into the types of things that would be told to them in theology seminars. The people in the pew don't really want to hear it. They've got what they need, the bits of dogma that sustain them, and
in fact, I have known ministers who lost their jobs
because they did go into it.
Now, I've known other ministers who've been able to make this work. I mean, it's a diplomatic thing, for one thing, and not all ministers can do it.
The thing about it is, as an atheist, I know some of these things because of the research I've done in these areas and the talks that I've had with some of the theologians. And if I try to bring that up with a standard parishioner, they call me a liar. They say that's not the way it is, you know. And I even show it to them in the Bible, and they say, well, that's not what it means, or it can't mean that. Ingersoll likes to point out that much of the religiosity that people carry around with them day to day, they were born into. One of the quotes that he has from Some Mistakes of Moses that I like is, if you were born in India, you would be a Hindu, believing in one God with three heads, not a Christian who believes in three gods with one head. I thought that was pretty cute. In the Trinity.
Well, there is something to say for the fact that people tend to hold to the religion in the country or in the area of the country in which they grew up. I mean, that's statistically a fact. Now, in some countries, it's against the law to raise questions about your religion.
Especially some of the Islamic countries.
Yeah, which is kind of sad because some of the great scholars have been, in the past, have been Islamic scholars, but in some ways fundamentalism has taken over in some of the countries now.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into the...
Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about that, how Islamists or Muslims were actually stultified and stopped by Muhammad with his words that turned their outward vision inward and made it concentrate on the book that he had written, rather than go back out into the scientific community like their minds had been for hundreds of centuries, well, many centuries before that. There were some of the leading scientific minds in the world at that time.
They saved the literature, the Arabs did, of Aristotle for the West. And also, you've got Persian and Arabic poetry that is just hard to beat. I mean, you can't beat it, as a matter of fact.
Now, we got a caller a little while ago. What were they calling about?
I want to know what our views are, and that's what we're going to get into. So, by the way, I talked recently to my former New Testament scholar, teacher, who is 96.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and he's still doing research.
Very good.
I admire him for that. He was my Greek teacher. We studied the Greek New Testament together. Now, my Old Testament teacher in seminary, both of them are dead by now. But I want to raise a question, if you don't mind, to move into the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament. Are we ready to move in? Because this is what Ingersoll did.
Sure.
The Hebrew Bible grew up in a tradition in a country that was tribalistic, and so you had many gods. And that's why you had, thou shalt have no other gods before me. You don't have commandments where people aren't, unless people are already doing something.
Right.
You see, you don't have a commandment, thou shalt not scratch the ears of giraffes, because nobody's doing it. So you have a constant problem of polytheism, or many gods. And you have Elohim, you have Adonai, and then you have Moses coming up with Yahweh, and this is supposed to be God's first name or last name, but anyhow, it's supposed to be the sacred name. And the word Jehovah is a kind of a German way
of pronouncing
it. Yeah, you put the Adonai vowels onto Yahweh, and then you turn the Y into a J, as you would in German.
Okay.
And now, in the Hebrew Bible, the reason we're addressing the question of violence in the Bible right now is because we often hear the Bible is our moral standard. And I think many Christians don't hold this. They hold that there are moral standards in the Bible and there is immorality in the Bible.
Yeah, but they don't hold that the immorality was actually exercised by the God of the Bible.
Well, what some of the scholars are trying to say is they believe some of the believers in that day thought God told them to commit wholesale slaughter of men, women, and children and cattle, and even destroying the artifacts of their
and enslave the virgins that were left over.
And that's said to be a commandment of the deity. Now, most Christians I know, and most Jews I know today, think that's not divine revelation, even though it's there in the Bible and it's presented as if it's divine revelation. So those who call the Bible the inerrant Word of God have to do a lot of juggling, it seems to me.
Well, whenever I talk to your standard pew sitter or a believer in the Christian dogma as is perceived by the Bible, the inerrant Word of God, the first thing they want to do is say, I just pointed out to them in the Bible, so it's right there. Well, that's not what it means. Well, what does it mean? Well, then they send me to a link that has like 12 paragraphs of explanation on it. So it's either it's not what it says or it's not what it means.
And some of it's clear cut.
Right. The book says what it says. And that's the problem that we have with the book. It's, a lot of the things that it says is just preposterous and morally reprehensible.
It's morally reprehensible.
Yes.
Yeah. Some of the best ethics that the human race has ever produced is in the Bible. And some of the most horrendous and horrible is in the Bible. But
even the best things that came out of the Bible were not originated in the Bible. There were previous holy books, there were previous moral systems.
Ethics was long before.
The laws of, I can't think of the guy's name.
Well, you got the Hammurabi Code.
Right.
But you had, think about it, it's logical. If a culture is say a tribe is going to survive, it's imperative that they have a rule against at least killing the insiders. Otherwise, they don't survive. They also have to have a rule against lying.
To have commerce.
Yeah. And also, if you're going to hunt, you better have good, clear communication. Otherwise, you become the hunted.
Right. This doesn't have to be revelation from a God. Is what the point we're trying to make here. It's not only human compassion, but it's just general knowledge that you don't want to harm somebody if you yourself don't want to be harmed. You have to live in a society. You make your rules. You make those rules into law, and then the society can then flourish.
Yeah. In fact, there's a passage in the Hebrew Bible It's pretty sensible. It goes this way. You were once strangers in Egypt, and the implication is you knew what it was like to be a stranger. And so the rule is treat strangers well in your country now. And that's the starting point, it seems to me.
That's so true.
The golden rule is get inside the other person's point of view.
You ready to jump into Genesis on a few things here?
Yeah, Genesis, for example, has the story of Abraham, who is said to be the founder of 3 religions, said to be. Now, I don't believe this, but I think these religions are too complicated to have just one founder. But let's look at Abraham. First of all, he lied 2 times about his wife and said, claim you are my sister. And that was to protect his skin. Now, the Pharaoh found out about it. Furthermore...
But who did God punish for that?
Well, later on...
Are we getting there? Okay.
Yeah. Now, later, apparently Sarah couldn't have a child, according to the story. So she got another woman, Hagar, to agree to be the surrogate. And it turns out to be a kind of a slave woman or servant woman in the family. And Abraham, through her, helped produce a baby. And now Sarah grew jealous and so demanded that Abraham dismiss the child and the mother and go to Abraham and say, no, this is not right. This is now my child and I'm responsible. He sent this other woman and the child out virtually in the desert with a jug of water, so that she, according to the story, carries the baby. And later on, they have to have a miracle in the story so that the baby and the mother don't die of thirst. But this is not the kind of father. Now, when you say father, Abraham, this is not fatherhood. This is spermhood. You have Abraham having this grandiose dream that through circumcision and his faith and so forth, that his seed will be as the stars in the skies and the sands of the sea. Now that's male megalomania. Fatherhood is not generating children.
Million children.
It's raising the children you bring. And I think at that point he failed. And the third point is he believed he heard a voice. Now, schizophrenics hear voices. We all maybe hear voices. But my wife was a counselor. She had a group of people who heard voices, and she said, well, you hear voices every day. Some of them make sense and some don't. So ask if they make any sense. Abraham heard a voice to offer his son Isaac as a sacrifice. And he took the boy.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, the story eventually turns out that Yahweh, the God, didn't want the sacrifice. But
he just tested him.
Yeah. Now the question I have though is, does this get Abraham off the hook? I say no.
No.
Because he was willing to do that.
Well, not only that, it doesn't let God off the hook either, because this is a very traumatic thing for a child. Can you imagine your father grabbing up a knife and hauling you off to an altar and going through every motion to sacrifice you? And then at the end saying, oh, sorry, oh, ha. No, this is a very traumatic thing for the child and the father, and God just seemed to want to do it just to prove a point. Since he was omniscient, he should have known the answer to begin with.
In the first place.
Yeah.
And you could say, well, he wanted Abraham to know it, but I think you're dead right. That's a heck of a thing to do to a kid, no matter how old the kid was. And it's a butcher knife.
Yeah.
In the Hebrew, it's pretty much a butcher knife that you slaughter animals with.
Well, he was also supposed to offer him as a sacrifice, so that means dismembering him and then burning his body on an altar. But even earlier than that, in Moses, and some mistakes of Moses, Ingersoll talks about separating the light from the darkness, and in this way they would be tangible. They would be separate entities, things that you could probably bottle up. And he says in his book, that there was even tales that in Rome they had a bottle of the darkness left over from the creation of the earth. And that's just not good science. I mean, that just doesn't make much sense that you could have darkness and light be separated like that. The land was separated from the firmament. They believed that the sky was the firmament and was therefore made of water. It was a huge dome over the earth, which was flat. Is that correct?
Well, this was, if we keep in mind, these people existed long before Galileo, Copernicus.
I understand the people thinking that.
But for us...
but for them to say that this is the inerrant Word of God, and then this is God writing all this down, saying, no, this is the way it was, which is, it's not true. I mean, we look up in the sky now.
Can you see, they, given their framework, they believed it was true. In that time. Yeah.
Even now, they believe it's true. And that's the problem that we have. People taking this as literal fact when, in fact, it is.
Well, there are some
myth.
who do try to take the Pentateuch, and particularly the first part of Genesis, as science. You have the young Earth theory, and
well,
the old Earth
that's the premise of some mistakes of Moses, is that people do take it literally, and he has the task in his book or his speech of taking them to reality, bringing them to what the earth would support and nature would support versus what it says in the book. They say that the plants begin to grow and the trees began to grow, but the sun wasn't invented till the next day. How do they grow without the sun?
Well, when you're in the miracle business, you can do what you want
to, right?
When you're in just words, you can have Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And that's magic.
Yep. And that's another thing we don't believe in. I mean, when you go to see a magician, do you believe he's actually doing magic up there on the stage? If you don't believe that, if you don't believe that magic actually exists there, why do you believe that miracles exist? That's basically magic being performed by a supernatural being.
Karl Barth is one of the most influential theologians of the 20th century. Said he took the Bible too seriously to take it literally.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
It'd be like you and I trying to take all of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey.
Exactly. A lot of people say that the Bible is so old that it must be true, but then the Iliad and Homer and all that is even older than that.
Some of the ancient Greeks took Homer to be a divine scripture. Plato did not want children to read some of the Homer's work because he said the gods are too immoral. It's a bad influence.
Right. Well, same with the Bible. It says the books in the Bible, this is Ingersoll again, say that the sun stopped for Joshua and actually went backwards in the sky just so Hezekiah wouldn't believe that he was going to die from a boil. And that we will be damned if we don't believe this. And Ingersoll said that he would be damned if he did believe that. That's the problem with the Bible. I mean, the people who push the Bible on you say you have to believe this. And if you don't believe it, you go to hell. So can you imagine showing up in front of the pearly gates and God said, were you a good man? This is in his thing. He says, yes, I paid all my bills. I was true to my wife. I raised 3 good children, and prepared for them after my death. And he said, well, did you believe the story about the snake and the... No, I didn't do that. You're off to hell. You've got to believe this crazy stuff to be able to... And the basis for your redemption is belief. And then they give us something that's unbelievable to do that.
I was at the supermarket the other day, and I had to show my Kroger card, and I said, people who go to heaven, they have to show their Kroger card. And
you get your heaven card.
Some of this is like you have to show your right belief.
He talks about how the Bible is the most talked about book in the world, but the least read book. He said you can't get 1 in 100 people to say that they've read the Bible, but you can't get 1 in 2 people to agree on what it says.
Well, you know that married couple, Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh yeah.
and in fact, there have been some studies about what people know about the Bible and don't know, and it is rather shocking.
It is.
In fact, you could make a good case, and see what you think about this. See, there are a lot of the very evangelical people, some of them, not all, the particular preachers, would like to have the Bible taught in the public school. Now, I'm not
as
opposed.
fact.
Yeah, what I would like to do is have it taught, but have it taught by good scholars.
Right, as a comparative religion class.
Yeah,
I agree. I would like to see the Bible taught in school like that. with compared to other holy books that are out there today and comparative religion classes. I think it's a very good idea. We're going to take a moment. It's about halfway through the show to do the mid-program break. Sponsor identification. We're sponsored by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. You can see the website at the top of the screen, and you can see that we have an email address, freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. Take my word for it. Yahoo.com. This is Freethought Forum, a program for the rationalists and the atheists and the freethinkers of East Tennessee. If you don't believe in God, you're not alone, right? Even right here in East Tennessee.
And you can send us feedback on email if you would, and the address is right there on the screen. But don't wait, call in now if you have time.
Even since we have phone trouble, you can still call in and leave a message or leave a comment, and we'll be happy to speak to that. The Atheist Society of Knoxville meets several times a month on Tuesday down at the Old City in Barley's Tap Room. We meet up for fun, food, and drink. We're atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, humanists who are reaching out with social support to other like-minded people in East Tennessee. The Ask mission statement is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to the rationalists and atheists in the Knoxville area. Remember, you're not alone. You can visit the Ask website for times and dates.
And the Rationalists of East Tennessee has Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussions on topics of timeless importance. For example, what should an atheist know about the Bible? What's art? And the evolutionary history of flowers. That's a very interesting topic.
I bet.
The language has evolution, so
Yes,
do the
they
flower.
sure do.
And thinking rationally about climate change, which is a very controversial topic, and I think it's time we thought rationally about it.
Once a month, we get together for a book club. Past books we have read are The God Delusion, American Age of Unreason,
The Virtue of Selfishness. I taught that book.
Did you?
Yeah. Now I disagree strongly with this conclusion.
Well, what's the conclusion?
Well, it's pretty much that selfishness is a virtue. I think self-interest is.
Self-interest.
But this is an interesting book. He's trying to talk about the selfish gene. But
Which
selfishness.
was Richard Dawkins' book.
Yeah. And there's a great difference between self-interest and selfishness, in my opinion.
Right. Another book is Wither Socialism and Your Inner Fish. I like to also throw in there A Demon-Haunted World by Carl Sagan, one of my favorites.
That's good, yeah.
Excellent book.
Now, let me throw one of mine.
Okay.
Is Abraham on Trial. I don't have it. I couldn't find it in my library. It must have by a
That
woman
fits into
who
today's topics, too.
It's an anthropologist, and she does a remarkable job studying this material from both a biblical perspective and from an anthropological. She thinks circumcision, now this is her view, and it's kind of interesting, that circumcision was viewed in that time of antiquity as a kind of preening, like you preen the trees or prune the trees. You know what I'm talking about?
Pruning them.
Yeah. And
To help it grow?
To help it grow, yeah. And then, in other words, that's why they called it seed. You see, now that was their. Now my view, and she may be right, but my view is that when you're trying to bargain with a deity to give a sacrifice, try to give an animal. And if that doesn't work, give a little finger. In fact, little finger around the world is one of the major sacrifices around the world.
Right?
Yeah.
Ooh.
But the best one, it seems to me, if you got it, is be a toenail or a piece in circumcision. Especially if you're a woman, that'd be a good deal.
Unless it
you
was
wouldn't
the full cutting that they experience in Islam. Some Islamic countries now, where they remove like the entire.
Well, that would castration would not help populate, and that's not pruning. No. Go ahead.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee support Camp Quest of the Smokies. It's a fun science summer school adventure. Visit the website in your screen or email us for further information.
My granddaughter just got
Through
back
that,
from that,
did she
and
come back?
she was just elated.
A lot of fun.
Yeah.
She didn't complain about the heat.
And I didn't hear a word about the heat.
Oh, good.
She's having too much enjoyment and got a good education.
Yeah.
Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee helped to provide a social outlet. And if you don't believe there's a God and want some fellowship, there's a place.
You're not alone.
Not alone. Place to meet.
Okay. Back to the Pentateuch.
Okay, now I want to read
where
a
we were.
passage.
Sure, go right ahead.
Tell me what kind of person would say something like this. Religions are degrading to man and insulting to God. Man's religions are among his worst crimes. There is in religions the progressive degradation of man's thought of God, etc., etc. Who would say this? Does that sound like Ingersoll?
Yeah, it sounds like Ingersoll or a free thinker or an atheist, but who said it?
This is B.B. Warfield, who is one of the saints, as it were, of the Reformed movement. And, of course, the evangelicals think he's, pretty much towards sainthood, if Protestants could have saints.
And he wasn't talking about his own religion.
He was talking about every other religion, the heathen religions.
It just shows how divisive religions are.
But you and I can show, taking the biblical text, that some of the worst crimes are in the Bible in the name of God. In fact, there's a book I want to mention written by a lawyer who knows both the law of that time, who studied it. And of course, he had to learn from the rabbis. But he studied biblical crime. David does not come off.
No.
In fact, one biblical scholar, this one I want to show.
As a young man, David used to raid nearby villages just for practice.
Killing women and children. Robert Alter has written a book on David and also wrote a book on Genesis. In the book on David, this Old Testament scholar compares David to a mafia chieftain.
There's another book called Bible Stories Your Parents Never Told You. And in that, the author, I can't remember what his name was, says, in those days, if a Jewish community or an Israelite community moved in next to you, it would be like the Hells Angels settling next door. Because the next thing you know, they're going to be in your face. They're going to be they're raiding your village, taking your women, things like that.
Yeah, if you took the Bible as historical. Now, I doubt if that's
what the Bible says.
I doubt if that was historically accurate.
We would hope not.
No, I don't think it is. I think this is boastful talk, grandiose talk. In some ways, it's insane talk.
It's fantasized history for the Jewish people. What is that?
For some of them, yes. Now, in fact, you can compare some parts of the Old Testament to this book, The Last Mafioso, because there's murder, treachery, deceit, and then you have hypocrisy. Here's an article published in the Scandinavian Journal of the Old Testament, in which the author is trying to show that David's prayer. Well, I'll read that. This is right from the Hebrew Bible. David, toward the end of his life, King David now, summarizing his life. Now, here is David, about whom we read in the Old Testament. He says, "Because my conduct was spotless, God rewarded me, for I have kept to the ways of Yahweh," that's God, "and have not turned from my Elohim," that's another God, "not turned away from my Elohim to wickedness. All his laws I have kept before me, and have never failed to follow his decrees. In his sight I was blameless." This is David talking, who is a first-rate thug in many ways.
Well, in God's sight, he might be blameless because he had the same sight.
Well, in fact,
the thuggishness.
The same Bible says that this God he's purporting to be quoting wouldn't let him build the temple because there was too much blood on his hand. And yet here's a guy. But now this is the way kings were in the Middle East of that time. They liked to be praised and exalted. In fact, it's very much like Stalin.
Well, all of those have a common thread of rampant authoritarianism and dictatorial views of the people that they reign over.
Yeah. Well, you take Stalin. I remember when Stalin died. I was young, and I remember the people gathered along the streets and referred to him as Father and Grandfather Joseph. Now here is one of the most wicked human beings of the 20th century. How did this happen? Well, he had control of
the media. And education.
And propaganda and education.
Propaganda.
And I think,
if you kill all your enemies, all you got left, friends.
Yeah. And by the way, when David, Susan, who wrote a book, I don't have it with me, War in the Old Testament, she points out, and other authors too, that when David was dying, he brought Solomon in and told him to make sure he exterminated Joab. In other words, it sounded just like the last mafioso, or the Godfather, or
take out my enemy while I can.
Yeah. So those were now what we're
expecting unquestioning obedience.
Yeah. Now what we're suggesting is not that these are not human beings. Like we're humanists, we recognize these are humans. These are not demons, but these sometimes they committed atrocities and evil, and their ways are not divine revelations.
Right.
And this prayer by David is nothing but either it's sheer hypocrisy on the part of David, or the writer who composed it didn't read the rest of the story.
Right. You know,
or meant it as a joke.
Right. Getting back to the point where God told him to kill his only son, or not his only son, but his son.
Abraham,
You know, I ask people about that, and I say, he's hearing a voice from God, and he's doing what he said. If you heard a voice like that now to tell you to kill your children, would you do that? No. Why not? Well, it wouldn't be God's voice. God wouldn't tell me to do something like that. That would probably be the voice of the devil. Well, why didn't Abraham think it was the voice of the devil?
As a matter of fact,
I mean, if you're going to judge the content of the voice and decide who the talker is, then half of the people in the Bible wouldn't have done the stuff that they did.
Yeah, exactly. And Abraham went in the Bible. This God is supposedly saying he's going to destroy this city, and he starts bargaining with God. If I can find this many people, righteous people, now why didn't he bargain with God on this case? I think this story, by the way, has no factual basis at all. I think it's a pure concoction. As a story trying to counter the other story of Jephthah, who said, if you let me win this battle, I'll offer the first thing comes out.
Well, one of the examples of human sacrifice in the Bible.
And his daughter came out, and he offered his daughter as a sacrifice. I think this story was invented to try to counter that. But inventing it still doesn't make Abraham look very good, because he was willing to do it.
No. And going back earlier in the Pentateuch, you remember when God paraded all the animals before Adam, expecting him to find a helpmeet? Can you imagine the outcome if he had? I mean, what would have happened to all of us?
And you'll have to admit, some men turned out to be like animals. But your point's well taken. That's such an ancient story. I mean, it goes way back. Probably.
And we should take it as an ancient myth and treat it like an ancient myth. And
because
not literal, God-spoken truth.
That's all people had at that time to try. They didn't have a really what we would call a systematic inquiry into history. They just didn't have that possibility. And so they had to come up with things like this.
Right. He got into Noah's Ark and all about the impossibility of gathering all the animals on the earth from all the four corners of the earth. And even if God just poofed them there, we have the dimensions of the ark. What did they eat? Did the lions eat the zebras? I mean, did he lock their jaws for a year so they couldn't eat and couldn't poop? You know, it's just...
I've often, when I was a kid, I must admit, I wondered who shoveled all the poop off.
There was only one window, and it was way the heck up there. Can you imagine carrying every shovel full up to the top of throwing it out? You never could be able to keep up. There are 40,000 different species of mammals alone, not counting reptiles and insects and all the other things.
To say nothing of viruses, organisms, microscopic.
And the food for each individual type of organism. And then it gets into, this is all stuff from the Robert Ingersoll book called Some Mistakes of Moses. And it really wasn't written as a book, it was written as a speech, which he gave, I'm sure, repeatedly. But he talks on a couple of these things like the Tower of Babel. Is there not anyone who does not know that languages are all invented differently in different areas of the world?
Good point.
I mean, any intelligent man or woman out there who doesn't know this and then reads this Torah and say, oh, well, we all spoke the same language at the same time?
And then God got angry and made them all pretty much forget the language.
And then they went out and started these other languages less than 2,000 years ago, 3,000.
You can see why some of the fundamentalists are so opposed to evolution. I mean, if you take a theory of evolution, you can explain better the development of language.
Certainly.
If you take this story, you're not going to be...
right.
It's not going to be very useful.
You have changes accumulating over time due to environmental pressures, which makes perfect sense if you think about it.
Now, one of the callers want to know if we were atheists. Now, an atheist is someone who says there's no God.
Not necessarily.
Go ahead.
An atheist is a person who does not believe in God. In other words, they have no belief in God. They lack a belief in God. Now, it's like being moral, amoral, or immoral. If you're moral, you have morals. If you're amoral, you don't have any morals, good or bad. And if you're immoral, you have bad morals. It's the same thing with atheism. They can have actually three choices. You can say, I'm an atheist because there is no God. So you're making a factual claim. Right. Because I believe there's no God. That's a factual claim to the positive. You can say I'm an atheist because I don't accept the claim of theists. But I don't accept the claim of atheists either. I don't accept either claim. I'm sitting in a position of no decision, no belief.
Would that be an agnostic?
No. Then you're talking about I have no knowledge. An Gnosticism goes in the direction of knowledge. Like personally, I'm an agnostic atheist. An agnostic has no knowledge of God, or says, I don't know if there's a God or not, and I don't.
Okay.
Then I'm an atheist because I don't believe that there's a God. So theism goes to belief, Gnosticism goes to knowledge.
Now, what if you're, let's say you're a naturalist. It tells you what you are, not what you aren't. A naturalist says, of the theories that I think that have been well spelled out, I think the natural world, that the whole world is not itself conscious.
No. There are people who believe in the consciousness of Gaia or the consciousness of the universe, but I'm not one of those.
No, but a naturalist would say, no, consciousness exists in pockets of the universe. You and I, and you could have degrees of consciousness from animals and so forth.
Right. No,
but there'd be no cosmic consciousness. Right. And that's why it'd be a naturalist.
Well, think about it. It's the only way that we know of where consciousness exists is due to the actions of neurons in a brain. Now, we have no examples of consciousness existing maybe in a computer. Some people might say, well, it's in a computer. No, the decisions that a computer makes is put there by intelligent beings, us. It's a tool that reacts quickly to electrons flowing down a pipe. But I've heard one, I think it was Daniel Dennett, who said that consciousness is an emergent property of two hemispheres of the brain. It's the conversation that results from the interaction of the two hemispheres of the brain.
A good word, yeah.
And I think that's about the best.
So in other words, in some ways you could say creativity does take place, but most of creativity in the universe is not planned.
Oh, you dropped your microphone?
Oh, right.
Sorry, technical difficulties.
Go ahead.
Okay. No, that's all I was going to say. If you look at the lowest animals, we would think that might have a smidgen of consciousness. Well, do they have hemispheres of the brain? If they don't, they may be just reacting due to what do you call it, environmental pressures and instincts, things like that. But
so there's no central nervous system in the universe, is what you're saying,
right? We know of.
That we know
I mean,
of.
it may be in a different plane or dimension.
Given that we don't know of,
right,
then we have to say, well, naturalism
right,
seems.
We have to withhold judgment on something that we have no evidence for.
Now, what you could say, the theory of God as some of the theories. See, there's no one theory of God in the Bible. That's a mistake when people say the God of the Bible. The Bible.
The word you used earlier, Elohim, is a plural for God.
Yeah, it is.
You know?
Yeah, and I think it reflects the pluralism of that time.
But I mean, they use word for one God. They use the same word for plural gods. There are women in the Bible that people used to believe was God's wife. Who was that?
Starts with an A. I've forgotten now.
I was thinking it was Esther or someone. But anyway,
go ahead. I know.
So
go.
Christianity and Israel Judaism came from a multi-God background concept.
And then you had Christianity developing. It's as if it developed into monotheism, and then that wasn't enough. So you have that didn't explain enough, and so they had in the Hebrew tradition, God has a co-creator called Sophia, is the Greek term, Sophia, wisdom. And then Paul later refers to Christ as the Sophia of God. And the Christians then turn Christ into a second part of the deity.
Right. They say it's a single God system, but we really know that it's not. If you think about the ancient Greeks, they had all these different gods, they had different functions. But now we have God, we have Jesus, we have the devil, his godlike powers. We have the angels that theoretically can do supernatural things. All of these pantheon of demons. We have our own multiverse of gods in the Christian Bible. It's just the Christians are in denial about it. It's all.
Well, in fact, some of the biblical scholars point out, and it's in the book of Job. It's translated Satan. It's better translated the adversary.
The adversary.
But it functions like a prosecuting attorney. But it's part of the heavenly court. It is a part of the work of the deity.
And all the other religions of the time and the previous religions seem to have the same type of structure. The God and the anti-God, the God and the other.
There's in the book of Genesis, this is Elohim speaking, translated God, let us make man. Now who's the us?
Right, let us make man.
Now maybe it's like LBJ used to talk about we making this decision called
you're talking about
plural of majesty.
the Queen's we. But the Queen's we was never heard of back that far. And
here we got a call. Let's hear what that is.
All right.
Go. Please.
Do you have a comment or question? He can't hear us. Remember, he's waiting for the TV.
Oh, go.
Do you have a comment or question?
And we lost contact.
Apparently. We're still having audio problems, apparently.
I'm sorry.
It's 5 minutes left in the show. When we get down to 3 minutes, we're going to take a little bit of a break from the back and forth here and give you a rare treat. We have some actual audio recording from Robert G. Ingersoll actually speaking himself and recorded by Thomas Edison on his phonograph, his newly invented phonograph. So this should be quite a treat, and we'll start that when we have about 3 minutes left, which is in about another minute.
Yeah, there's a call. Let's see if we can get it. Go ahead, please. Can we hear you?
Hello?
Hello? I'm sorry, we just can't hear you. We lost out.
That's funny is in the rehearsal we could always hear, but they couldn't hear us. And maybe the whole problem that they can't hear us. They go ahead.
Maybe they could. Anyway, well, I want to recommend a book, The Old Testament Parallels, showing some of the material that was written probably before, long before the final, what we call the final version of the Hebrew Bible.
That'd be very interesting reading, I would think.
It's very interesting material. Also, I'd like to. This is if you're really good in biblical, say the Society of Biblical Literature puts out a journal, and they put out. This is some of the best scholars in the country, in my opinion. And sometimes they borrow from Europe.
Cool.
But they put out incredibly good stuff. And then I want to show one other book.
Have about 30 seconds left before we go to the
World Mythology, to show that the Hebrew and the Christian tradition is not the only religion that has hip deep in mythology.
My daughter gave me a book called Religion for Dummies, and it was a very interesting research book, and it had a lot of good information in it. So we're going to be queuing up this file. It's an audio-video file, so be queuing it up about now.
Thank you, audience.
Tell us.
The hope of another life within the heart long before the sins of this place, when we remember long after all the sins of this place, and the religious practice and superseded sin. Hope is the consolation of the world. The wander of hope to hope. Hope is God, the hope desires, the spirit is strong. To keep them suffering, hope for help. Hope is the rest and grace to roses and live. Alone with the precision, hope for life. Hope brings the mother to the light, and see the beauty on their evil. The cool and firmly trained oxygen, fight as the last and glitter, hope for life. Hope brings their sin and friendly hands with gold. Desiring hope for blessings for another boat. The love leaves above the palace gate and distance, we shall meet again. Hope is the consolation of the world. Let us hope that there be a lost supply of it. Let us hope that there be another life that will bring peace and joy to all the children of men. And let us hope that this world on which we live may be a perfect world, a world without a wrong, a world without a peace.
Okay, and welcome back to the show. We have about a minute left. You had one more book you'd like to show?
Oh, yes. This is the Oxford Study of the Bible. It's got some wonderful introductory articles and some good footnotes. It's an outstanding study Bible.
Very good. One thing we'd like to say is be sure to pick up this book that we've been talking about today. It's called Some Mistakes of Moses by Robert G. Ingersoll.
Yes.
Excellent book, full of great quotes and good thoughts, too.
It's in a good tradition of Tom Paine. Yeah,
right. Some Mistakes of Moses, Robert G. Ingersoll. He's also published, his heirs have published many of his other works, and since they're out of copyright, you can get them fairly inexpensively and download them directly off of the internet. We got this recording of his voice from YouTube. You can also find many of his other works on YouTube as well. Time to wrap things up. If you got a pen and paper, we'll show our email one more time. If you want to send us feedback, call 865-272-9060, and you can leave a message there. Our email address, freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. And we'd like to leave you with our thanks for Sam and Jonas for technical help.